So political socialization it has to do with why we believe what we believe, okay? You took your ideology test, which was about what you personally believe about things, okay? That's called your political ideology. That ideology comes from somewhere, and in many cases comes from multiple places. And none of our ideology is going to be exactly the same. Okay, and also none of our socialization will be the same. We don't all come in contact with the exact same socializing factors to form our opinions. Okay, even if we agree on the issue, we may have been socialized differently. So first, the definition for ideology, just so that you know, I mean, it's one of your terms on your rubric that'll be on the test, is a cohesive set of beliefs or ideas, right, about politics, public policy, and the role of the government. Right? Then, and so, like, when it comes to that set of beliefs in America, we all kind of get put in two major boxes. Right, like the Democratic or liberal side, or the Republican conservative side. Okay? It's just because we're a two-party system. It's the way that our system works. And so then we get forced into these boxes, okay, to define us. Part of this objective is going to be really being able to tell the difference between the two parties or the two sides of the spectrum. And as you can see up here, there's just a few things. This list can go on and on and on with different things. But the parties have what we call platforms. The party platform is their list of beliefs about all the different issues. So that you can kind of look at it and go, I'm kind of more this than that. For example, the liberal or democratic side, when it comes to the economy, and we just finished, studying economic systems. When it comes to the economy, the liberal or Democratic Party side believes in more regulation of the economy, more government involvement. The right or conservative Republican Party wants to deregulate the economy, less government involvement. Does it make sense? The Liberal Democratic Party wants to expand welfare, all those social welfare programs like health care and Social Security and things like that. The Republican Party, the conservative side, wants to decrease social welfare programs. And I want to stop and say real quick that, that does not mean the Republican Party doesn't think the government should take care of people. It's not that they don't care about people. I hear people say that every year, and I want to be clear. They just don't believe the federal government should be responsible for that. Maybe state governments can do that if they want to. They don't believe that the federal government should be doing that. Yes?
These are supposed to be like estimates, right?
This is just, so far, remember I said you just need to list the agents, and we're not even there yet. I'm just making sure you understand. Okay? We'll be doing more of this later. The Liberal Democratic side likes national health care. That's why during the election you always hear the Republicans calling the Democrats socialists, right? More health care, more of a social welfare state, right? Whereas, again, the conservative Republican Party wants to reduce government influence in health care because, again, they don't think the federal government should be providing that for everybody. It should be left to the states. Liberal Democratic Party, more pro-choice. Conservative Republican Party, more pro-life. Important to state here that every Republican isn't necessarily pro-life and every Democrat isn't necessarily pro-choice. Okay, it's just overall that's their stance as a party. And then the Democratic Party, the liberal side, wants to lower taxes on the middle class and raise taxes on the wealthiest people, whereas the Conservative Party wants to just lower taxes altogether. Think about that for a minute. If the government's providing less things, they don't need as many taxes, right? Smaller federal government. your Republican Party would be more likely to support a confederation, right? Because they want the states to have more of that power than the federal government. Okay? All right. So, political socialization. I would maybe write this down somewhere on your notes there at the top of the socialization sheet. Just so that you have the definition on here. The process by which political values are formed and passed from one generation to the next. And one of the test questions that you might see is that the number one factor is family. That means the number one most influential of the socialization factors tends to be family. Because it's the first one we experience, right? We're hearing our parents talk about things from the day we're born. We may not understand a whole lot of it right at first there, but as we grow, we hear more. And maybe your family doesn't talk about government and politics, but sometimes they do. Maybe it is just simply they're complaining about the president or about Congress. That gets in your head and it socializes you. Okay? Now, other factors. This is where you start listing them up there, right? Okay, on your sheet. All right, gender is a factor, so put that on there. That's one of the socialization factors, is gender. Now, this confuses people sometimes, because they're like, how does the fact that I'm a girl or a guy affect what I think about government? Well, females do experience some different things throughout their life than males do, right?
Like kind of like opinions on abortions, whether they're pro-life.
Abortion, or even prenatal care, health care, contraception. There's a whole lot of things that you can immediately associate with gender that the government tries to get their hands on, right?
What exactly are we supposed to be putting this?
You're supposed to be listing it up here around the agents. Yeah. So, for example, statistics that we see, okay, when it comes to gender. For some reason, more men support the military than women do. Doesn't mean women don't support the military, but statistically, we do see more support for it. Maybe some more gung-ho support for it, right, than women. Could part of that be the fact that women haven't always been allowed to even be in the military? Yeah, right? We are now still trying to fully integrate the military to include women. Whether or not you think that should happen may depend on your gender as well. Statistically, more women consider sexual harassment a serious problem than men. Maybe because more, not saying men don't experience sexual harassment, but statistically it seems like women probably experience it more, therefore it's more of a big problem to them, right? And we're looking for the government to pass laws to protect us from that. Okay? Since the 60s, as far as voting statistics, women tend to vote more Democratic than men. Doesn't mean men don't vote Democrat, right? So gender, though, is not as significant as some of the other factors, but it is sometimes a factor. Religion is a big one. All right? I think it's kind of obvious there, so you want to put religion on there as an agent on your notes. You guys, is religion going to socialize you if you don't go to church? Or if you don't believe in God? Right? I mean, it might, a little bit. You may be like, what is it, Matt, why, churches shouldn't be tax exempt. If you don't believe in religion, you may not understand that, right? So it could affect your thoughts on that. But it's going to affect people more who regularly attend church services. Statistically, it even depends on what religion you practice. Whether you're Protestant or Jewish, Catholic, for example. Protestants tend to be more conservative on economic matters than Catholics or Jewish people. Okay? Jewish People tend to be liberal on economic and social issues, more so than Catholics and Protestants. So you can see here, I don't need to go through all of them, but even just whatever religion you are can socialize you differently. Does that make sense?
Because you have certain beliefs and certain things that
Yeah.
the government can control.
Yeah. You know, I mean, again, we go back to like abortion and contraception. Those are two big things, especially in, I would say, like the Protestant and Catholic Church, where they don't think that the government should be providing or putting money toward those type of things. Okay, so that's kind of how that works statistically. That doesn't mean every Catholic or every Protestant believes that, okay? Race and ethnicity is another factor. The experiences that you have, depending or, you know, based on what race or ethnicity you are, can affect what you want and think the government should do. Okay. Statistically, African Americans do tend to vote more Democratic. Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans also tend to vote more Democratic. They have kind of more statistically voters, the Democratic Party does, that are minority than the Republican Party does. That does not mean, though, that you don't have minority voters for the Republican Party. It's just statistically we see more.
Why is it such a big percentage, like 90%?
Well,
Democratic?
there's so much we could go into, like, for that. Some of it could come down to, this is just stuff that you read, right? It doesn't mean you have to agree with it. But there are some studies that say because of the unequal treatment that they have received in the past has not allowed them to economically be as successful as white Caucasian people. And so therefore, because of that, they need more services for from the government, and therefore are gonna vote more Democratic because the Democratic Party is more for providing more services. Now, does that mean that there's not white Caucasian people who are poor and need services from the government and want help? No. And again, like I said, those are just certain studies and certain papers that have been written. It's just one fodder idea as to why. Okay, but I'm sure there's many others out there. Just show some statistics. Okay, geographic region. Where you live can impact how you vote. Statistically, we see that on the coasts, or the closer you get to the coast, the more liberal or democratic voter you tend to be. Does that mean there's not conservative voters in California? Or New York? No. Okay? But statistically, we see more conservative voters in the Midwest. If you live in a city, urban areas, you're more likely to vote Democratic or liberal.
Seems like a lot of things are more democratic, like, there hasn't been much.
Well, but more rural voters, more of your non-urban voters tend to be more conservative. You know? So again, that's just a reiteration of the political socialization definition. Mass media is another agent of socialization. Now, it's important to point out that mass media means those media sources that reach millions of people, the whole country, or even world. Okay, your CNN, your NBC, your Fox News, your ABC, CBS, those kind of things, okay? Mass media in 2004, I know that's a long time ago, but in 2004, over 40% of those polled regularly learned about the election of candidates from not news programs necessarily, but sort of more entertainment news sources, okay? Which is different than what it used to be before that. okay? It used to be like your news, your nightly news, right? These are more satirical. They poke fun at things. They tell you about issues, but they're doing it in a more entertaining way, right? What do you think the number one way people get their news is now? Social media and Facebook, yes. So this changes. It's still, Facebook is considered mass media now because it does reach like almost everyone, right? So, you know, there's so much that has changed by that, but media is a big factor. You guys hear things about the government on TikTok, right? Yeah. Maybe just people's opinions, right? Which, take that with a grain of salt, right? But at least you're hearing something. At least you're like aware that something's going on. At least you know there's an election coming up. I don't know. What is this? So yeah, so candidates have had to kind of switch how they campaign too, and they've had to make sure they have appearances on here. I remember it was a big thing when Bill Clinton was running for president. He was on MTV multiple times. This was when we all watched MTV. I don't know if you guys even watch MTV anymore, but like we would watch it all the time. And then there's a presidential candidate on there, and he pulls out a saxophone and he plays a saxophone, and we were like, he's so cool, just because he like isn't some stuffy old white guy that like, you know, talks about things and uses words we don't understand. Like he was on MTV, right? So the younger voters came out in droves for him. Okay, and candidates have started to do that more. You see Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump both on these late night shows that people watch for entertainment, but then you're like, oh, there they are, and they're humanizing themselves. Yeah.
Like something like that, wouldn't that make like age an agent?
Yeah. Mhm.
Just that one word.
Age can be an agent as well. This is by no means a comprehensive list of everything that could be an agent, because again, we all are socialized differently. Our job could be a socializing agent. If I work for the federal government, it's gonna change the way I think about what I want from the government, right? Yeah, if I'm, you know, older Americans tend to be more conservative than younger Americans. So age is definitely one of those things. Okay? Yeah, that's an old statistic too. I need to change that. So that's socialization, you guys. I want you to take this list that you have now, and I want you to, on the rest of your page, okay, your socialization notes page, down at the bottom, there's a list of some of the very important issues. And I want you to think about and put down there what factors socialized you the most for each of those things. And it doesn't have to all be the same. It actually could change quite a bit depending on the issue. All right, oh, school and education is one of those too, and so are your peers. Let's write those down real quick at the top. Let's put age, let's put employment, peers, and what did I say just a second ago? School. Like your government class is probably going to, in some way, maybe not majorly, but a little bit socialize you as far as your thoughts about government. Because you're learning a little bit more about government.
Wasn't there supposed to be a debate last night or something?
It wasn't really a debate. It was town hall meetings that they both had. Which is them sitting in front of people asking questions, instead of them both answering questions and arguing with each other.
The whole entire time.
The whole time.
Isn't there one like on the 22nd or something?
I'd have to look. I can't remember. Okay. So how do your friends socialize you? Your peers?
Give their opinions.
Yeah. Do they talk about President Trump? Sometimes. Maybe some of you aren't socialized by your peers, but maybe some of you are, right? Again, your job, we talked about employment. So those can be things you list as well. All right?
So on each of the like first 15 supposed to like explain how
Nope, you don't have to explain it, you just list it. Tell me, put on there, not telling me necessarily, but just thinking about and putting it down on paper. Which of these socializing factors we've talked about was the most influential in you deciding what you think about those issues?